Take you for a ride on a slow boat to China. Tell me where in the world is
the sexiest voice in all of sports media, Nick Friedell.
Nick has this rugged masculinity that all of us at ESPN are jealous of.
I don't know about friend of the program because I think you're lumping me in with being a friend of Friedell, and I don't want to be associated with all that.
Thank you, Nick, and your voice is very deep and sexy.
What you gonna do, brother? Yeah, exactly. When Mac Jones is coming for you? How would you describe the level of hope that everyone else spoke with yesterday in regards to what James Wiseman brought?
What are they talking about regarding Wiseman and like the impact he can make this season?
Yeah, just how much
obviously you can't predict the future, and we'll see what happens this summer. But would you be willing to take less money?
Bro, I'm not answering your questions no more. I'm sorry. Next question.
Level of hope when it came to James Wiseman. And by the way,
and I think we're still waiting.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that hope is out the door. I think the Indiana Pacers are asking about that as well. Nick Friedell joining us here on the River Islands guest line. Nick, we want to bring in this conversation because we were having this because Steve Kerr joined us yesterday, joined our station, I should say, and talked about Steph and LeBron. And obviously, the showcase that they put on Christmas was awesome. It was amazing. When the NBA, a day where it was getting taken over by the NFL, it felt good to see Steph and LeBron carry the league once again on their shoulders. And not to say that they're like for like Magic and Bird, because I think Magic and Bird is just such on a different level when it comes to rivalries. But where would you rank Steph and LeBron as a rivalry in regards to, let's just keep it to this century. And you can go NFL, you can go Major League Baseball, or you can stick to the NBA. Steph and LeBron as a rivalry, you say what?
I'd say in the last 25 years, it's about the best that we've got. Because everything else that I can think of off the top of my head would be teams. You know, Yankees, Red Sox, Michigan, Ohio State. Nothing else player to player at the level they've been at and at the games that they've had between themselves and all those finals would rival anything in the last 20, 25 years. Those two have single-handedly, I think with help to a lesser extent from Kevin Durant, carried the league for a long time in the last 10 to 15 years. And what worries me, guys, looking ahead, and I've talked to you both about this over time, but Steph and LeBron are the two guys that people who do not follow the NBA at all know in this era. And LeBron has, maybe a year and a half left, maybe two. We'll see. And Steph, he had that interview with Malika the other day where he admitted, the end is near, and we're not going to see that much more time play out. So I really, really think that the NBA is going to slide even more when those two go, because they have been the standard bearers for so long. So as cool as it was to see that game and see the end of it play out the way that it did between those two, and Steph's hitting all those crazy shots, as we know in the Bay he can do, and that's what makes him so unbelievable. The other part to that is there are not too many more games between those two coming, and the NBA is in for a real problem when they leave the stage. Well, that and you bring me to my next point. And, having those two teams and two franchises, I get it. It being the primetime matchup, the 5 o'clock West Coast, 8 o'clock East Coast, I get that. But in years past, it was never going to be a matchup between two play-in teams. It was going to be, what is the next championship matchup going to be? Or do they do a replay of last year's championship matchup, right? So to have the Boston Celtics play earlier in the day when no one really gave a rip that they're playing the Sixers, a bad Sixers team at that, and the Sixers end up winning it, it just felt like I understand why you want to promote Stephen Curry and LeBron James, but this is the problem with the NBA right now. They're going to be gone in a few years, and to not have a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander on the stage
the next up-and-coming team, that Oklahoma City Thunder. By the way, he dropped 45 last night, looked incredible. Like, I thought that was just a disservice to what the future of the league should be about, and it should be about celebrating guys like Shai Gilgeous, or hell, a John Morant who's been balling. They dropped, 155 yesterday, something ridiculous? Teams like that. But at the same time, I understand why they did it, but if you're looking at the future right now and you're Adam Silver, you got to start promoting these young guys more and more and have them be the faces, right?
You do, but the flip side to that, and I can say this given my experience looking at the metrics of the last 15 years or so. I mean, I remember going into those conference rooms when we would all sit together in LA and they would say, okay, LeBron is at the top and there's a big gap, and Steph is second and there's a bigger gap and Kevin is third. And then after that, it was like, okay. This was more for what kind of stories that we were trying to produce at the time. And that has turned into the ratings conversation. I think the problem in trying to say, okay, we're going to focus on that next era. Guys, we don't know three things about Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The first thing that comes to mind after he is an incredible player, he's probably going to win an MVP, if not this year, at some point in the next couple, is that he was in that absolutely terrible commercial with Chet Holmgren that I still can't believe showed up so many times. But we just don't know enough about a lot of the next wave. I mean, Ja was supposed to be the face. He was beloved. The league was trying to push him, and then he had all his problems off the floor. Zion was supposed to be a face. He can't stay on the floor. He can't play consistently. Tatum is a title winner now in Boston. He is an incredibly talented player, but his personality, at least publicly, shows absolutely nothing that's of interest to people in and outside of the game. So there's a reason why Steph and LeBron have held on to the top spot for so long, on top of being two of the best we've ever seen play. People appreciate who they seem to be from a public perception standpoint. And the NBA, guys, it just does not have those next guys coming. And it's not to say that somebody won't appear. I know there's a lot of hope around Victor Wembanyama, but I just don't see it right now. I don't see people going out of their way to go, oh, what did Wemby do tonight? You know, awesome player, but it's more to that when you're trying to become the next face of the league.
I mean, you're talking about the next face of the league. I look at it, Nick, where it's like for a long period of time from 1980 to 2019, you had a lot of dynasties during that time, where it was the Lakers and Celtics, the Bulls, the Rockets, the Heat, the Warriors, the Lakers and Spurs. But in the last 6 years, you've had 6 different teams win an NBA championship, which is the level of parity we have not seen since the 1970s. How much of it also is just right now there's no like one dominant big bad team for all the other teams in the league to chase, like there was for an almost 40-year period of NBA history?
I think it's a big part of it, because think about this, guys. Let's focus on the Warriors. When the Warriors first won that first title, it was like, oh man, this team is fun. And people knew Steph, and this ties back to everything we're talking about now, because they had followed him from Davidson, because he was hitting all those threes. And then he gets to the pros and he's hitting even more threes with Clay, and Draymond's playing great, and you've got Kerr hitting all the buttons that they needed to win that first title. And they really were loved. And then they lose to LeBron, and then Kevin comes. And in a broader discussion about the league, I really think that's where the NBA lost a lot of people as far as the regular season goes, because Kevin goes to the Warriors, and we were all sitting there watching this play out. It was like, oh God, well, who cares about these games now in the regular season? Like, this team is just so much better than everybody else. So the point there, though, is people hated the Warriors, but they were still tuning in to watch them, because at that point they wanted to watch them lose. So there was that juice and storyline behind, all right, well, this team has gone from loved to hated, And now, who is that next team that's out there? Again, it's not to say that it won't happen. It is to say that it doesn't exist in the moment. And if you were buying stock into what the short-term future holds, I'm just very, very concerned. And I say that as somebody who's made their professional livelihood around the league for the better part of 2 decades at this point. There's just not a lot of interest in the day-to-day like there was, to your point, 5, 10, 15 years ago.
On the line is Audacy Sports NBA insider Nick Friedell, joining us courtesy of the River Islands guest line. Spadoni and Lubman in for Bonte Hill and Joe Shasky here on the Morning Roast. And taking more of a deep dive into the league itself and to the Golden State Warriors in particular. Tough loss, obviously, on Christmas Day. Austin Reeves, the game winner there late. Flurry from Steph to even tie it up late. It was awesome to watch. But, you know, you look back at last year, Nick, and you fast forward to this year, and if you just look at the records, it damn near identical. This time last year, you lose to Denver in Denver on Christmas Day, and you're a 500 team. Fast forward to now, you're a game over 500. You don't have Klay Thompson. There's no Chris Paul on this team. You're asking a lot of Brandon Pajemski, Jonathan Kuminga. Buddy Hield is looking like the Buddy Hield of old, where he was a journeyman, right? Andrew Wiggins, you have a great performance from him. You have a great performance from Steph Curry, and it's still not enough to beat a Lakers team that didn't even have their best player in Anthony Davis. So just give us the pulse on this Warriors team right now, what you've been seeing, and I guess what you expect to see going forward from them, because, you know, we had Steve Kerr on yesterday, and he thinks it's just a confidence issue. There's a lot of issues right now at the Golden State Warriors, and I don't know what the remedy is right now going forward for them.
Spadoni, I don't think there is a remedy, because I think the reality is they are what their record is. They're just not good enough. And the problem for the Warriors is they've been so damn good for so long that you're judging them based on titles. You're judging them based on their ability to get into the postseason and make some noise. You're not saying, oh, well, you know what would be a really great year for this team? To make the postseason, to win a first-round series, and then say, you know, we gave everything we had, and it's just not enough. When you have Steph still playing at the level he's at, which is incredible, you're trying to find ways to make another run happen. And with the current roster construction, I just don't see that as a possibility. So, of course, the next question is, all right, well, then what happens next? I think they have to make a move. But, guys, I feel like we're trapped in the Bradley Beal conversation from 4 or 5 years ago. Like, oh, man, if they could just get Beal, what do they have to trade? What would it take? I know there's a lot of at least speculation around Jimmy Butler right now. I actually think he would fit in that Warriors locker room. I think he would fit within the framework of what they built. And don't forget, Mike Dunleavy played with Jimmy in Chicago for a couple of years. Draymond played with Jimmy in the Olympics in Rio. I mean, there are guys he has a solid working relationship with already. I've covered Jimmy as closely as anybody since he came into the league. If you're trading for Jimmy to get him, though, Miami's going to say, all right, give us all your young prospects and a bunch of draft picks. So in order to get him, I don't think that's enough either. It's a long way of saying I think the Warriors are stuck in a bad place because they're only going to be judged on how close were they to another championship. And with the way things are right now and the possibilities that are out there, I'm not saying they can't get better. I just don't see them as a legitimate title contender.
I mean, based on what we've been seeing just these last couple weeks, Nick, it's hard to disagree with you. This team started off 12-3, and they're 3-11 since, with no Steph tonight in LA against the Clippers. Probably going to be 3-12 a stretch here to get them to that even 15-15 record. But you're talking about Jimmy Butler there. Another guy whose name is popping up here at this station is Zion Williamson. You mentioned him a few minutes ago as a potential future face of the league type player. Zion's a guy who I look at, he's a lot younger, so he's a guy you can kind of maybe build around after Steph retires. But I don't know, is that a big whale, so to speak, worth chasing? I don't mean to take a shot at his weight with that one there, but Is that a player worth chasing for the Warriors in terms of what they would have to give up to bring him in, or is that just a lot of kind of talking hot air that's going to end with him staying on the Pelicans and the Warriors going in a different direction?
Sam, I wouldn't go near Zion if you paid me if I were Mike Dunleavy.
Wow, really?
No way. And I say that because at this stage of his career, he has shown repeatedly he just cannot stay on the floor. I actually was in New Orleans when the Warriors played the Pelicans a few weeks ago, and I went to the Pelicans facility, and I saw Zion, and he is just big again. I mean, he's put on a lot of weight again, and it's sad because, again, the NBA needed desperately for him to be that next guy, the next face, and it just hasn't happened. And I don't believe whether you put Zion in a different setting or not that he is focused enough to be able to keep the weight off. I say this in context because, and I'm the first to acknowledge this, you guys know full well, and Bonte and Joe love to remind me every time, I did not think the Wiggins deal was going to work for the Warriors because I had watched Andrew Wiggins for several years pretty closely in Minnesota. And you got a really great performance one night, and you got another performance where he was just kind of going through the motions. And the feeling when I would talk to people in the organization was, all right, well, if you get him into our system, we will bring the best out of him. He'll be playing with Steph. He'll be playing with Draymond. And I just never believed that it could happen. I was wrong. Andrew Wiggins was the second best player on that title team a couple years ago. Andrew Wiggins. And he was awesome behind Steph. So is there a chance with Zion that you bring him over to the Bay and, okay, he keeps the weight off and he's focused and there are no health concerns? Sure, I think the Wiggins deal proves that. But the flip side of that, guys, is, and Sam, this is where it's all headed. If you're the Pelicans and you have put everything into Zion and wanted him so desperately to be the guy, you're going to ask for everything back from the Warriors in this hypothetical situation. So I wouldn't make that deal at all. But if the Wiggins acquisition showed anything, it is that there's always hope for a talented player in the right setting. I think the difference is there were no real questions about Wiggins' health day to day. There are about Zion, and that's why for me it would be not a chance.
Wow, that's interesting there. We talked about the Zion situation. You kind of mentioned how the NBA really wanted him to kind of take off there and be that next star. Like, what did happen then with him in New Orleans? Like, how did it just not take off like the NBA was kind of hoping with him? Was the situation just like a bad kind of culture set up in New Orleans? Was it something to do with him? Do we all just over-evaluate what he could bring to the table? Like, where did it go wrong with Zion to the point where there's all that talent that you're kind of cautioning this team to stay away from?
When you're going into the NBA, guys, the culture and the setup of any organization for a young player is incredibly important. And it just doesn't seem like the framework was in a solid place with the Pelicans. Now, having said that, having watched Zion in his first few years in the league here, you can blame the Pelicans all day long, and you can say, well, they didn't have everything set up the way they should have. The other part is Zion just kept getting big. I mean, this is just the reality. He could not keep the weight off when the injuries appeared. And as you know, it's a cycle. If you have hamstring injuries or knee injuries and you're not able to move as much, the worst thing you can do is gain more weight because it's just putting more pressure on the joints. I remember going to a shoot around at Chase Center like 3 years ago, and you're seeing him walk around and you're like, what in the world? Like, that was when the Pelicans were so concerned that videos had gotten out that they weren't letting him kind of get ready or get changed out there on the floor on his own. So there were always some people around him so that you couldn't get a clear view of exactly what's happening. I mean,
Nick,
guys, I
he
feel
had
bad.
Mountain Dew commercials, and you could see his weight being a problem in the commercial. Doing it for soda, it was that bad.
I mean, I really feel bad for him. And Joe, I mean, when you go back to Zion at Duke, I think universally everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, this guy is unbelievable."
Oh, he blew through his shoe. Remember that? It was like a big
son of Obama.
Obama was there. Yeah,
That's right. I mean, everybody sat there and went, "This could be the next guy," and there was so much hope that he brought, because you want to talk about a town that just does not have seemingly any interest in a team. It's New Orleans with the Pelicans, but here comes Zion after all the debacle at the end with Anthony Davis. All right, this is the guy. And he just cannot stay on the floor. And in the NBA, when you can't stay on the floor, there's nothing you can say. There's nothing a team can do. You are just in a bad spot. And that's why Zion could go anywhere. The biggest thing he has to change is when he looks into the mirror, he's got to be focused on getting the best version of himself out there each and every night. And right now, for whatever reason is going on, that has not been the case.
Talking with Audacy Sports NBA insider Nick Friedell here on the Morning Roast. Spadoni and Lubman in Fort Ponte Hill, and Joe Shasky. You've been so good to us, Nick. We'll get you out of here with this one. The Dennis Schröder acquisition. It's early, 4 games in, but the results have not been promising. Your thoughts on the acquisition itself and the Warriors trying to get Dennis Schröder involved more and more in how he's looked in a Golden State Warriors uniform?
Joe, I liked it initially. It made sense. It was a veteran guard for a veteran team that was trying to get the younger pieces to come along. It just hasn't looked right to this point, where I would caution everybody in saying, "Oh, no, it's not going to work." There's always a learning curve when you're learning to play with Steph Curry in this system. Guys do not understand sometimes just what it takes because of how much attention that he draws. The name that comes to mind that we all watched was Kelly Oubre, especially thinking back to the
it's your
Open
boy.
there. Yeah, my best friend Kelly. But some guys just they don't get it. I mean, Oubre had so many open looks from 3 based off of the attention that Steph drew and the open spaces on the floor that he created, and he just couldn't knock down those shots, and it wasn't a fit. Schröder has played with a lot of different guys. He's played in big games before, especially on the international level. I think it'll work out better than what we've seen. The problem, guys, is the Warriors certainly were hoping that it would work out immediately, that you could just plug him in and he would start rolling and it would give a jolt to everybody else. That clearly has not happened. And now the next question is, okay, well, what's the next deal? Because you better make another deal. This team doesn't look like it's going anywhere. So I'm not sure when it's going to come, but I would be shocked at this point if the 3 of us aren't talking prior to the deadline and Mike Dunleavy and that staff hasn't made another deal. Because at this stage with Steph, you can't just run it out with a team that's going to hover around 500 the rest of the way. I've said several times, I don't see a situation where the Warriors go from mediocrity all the way back to another title or close to it. But with the expectations as high as they always are, and with Joe Lacob behind the scenes pushing for whatever's coming next, I would just be really, really surprised if Schröder's the only move that this team makes.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, Nick, I mean, there's 2 guys on this team who we mentioned a lot, Jonathan Kuminga and Brandon Podziemski. Both were different levels of untouchable this past summer during the Lowry Markkanen trade talks. I'm kind of curious now as we go forward. Obviously, Lowry's no longer on the table because he's not eligible to be traded until the day after the trade deadline. But we're looking at that trade deadline. I believe it's February 15th, I believe, is the day. Are Jonathan Kuminga and Brandon Podziemski, are they still going to be on this team after the trade deadline passes?
Sam, I'm not sure where they will end up right now, but they cannot be a reason why a deal wasn't made, because there was so much chatter in the summer. Warriors didn't want to include Pods in something, and they want to get more for Kuminga if he gets moved. If it's me and I'm sitting there looking at all the possibilities over the next few years, and those are still the best 2 trade assets that you have, I am moving those guys if the right deal presents itself. But this is the issue in the NBA. And this is where fans sometimes get it all twisted, because everybody is fascinated by trades. They're fun to talk about, think about what can happen, the different possibilities. It is so hard to actually pull off trades in the league because there are so many different factors that play into it. It's the financial stuff. It's, can you get contracts to match up? Do teams feel like they're getting an equal share on both sides? I just don't know if, because there was so much hope around both of those guys, that Mike is going to just throw them in some deal just to make a deal happen. Having said that, if it's me and a team calls about Kuminga and I'm unsure if I'm the Warriors, if I want to give him that max or close to max, whatever he's looking for in that next deal coming up, I would move him, because I just have never gotten the sense that he fits in the system the way this team likes to play.
Nick, you are very good to us this morning. Appreciate the time, man, and we'll talk again soon.
Always, guys. Keep rolling. It's great to hear you.
You too, man. Yeah, he's the best. His cousin Nick Friedell. That was Audacy Sports NBA Insider Nick Friedell. Remember to check out the variety of NBA Audacy podcasts wherever you get your content. Cousin Nick, there he goes. You can find that entire interview on YouTube or on the free Audacy app. You're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco and Audacy Sports Station. Always live on the free Audacy app. Sam